Okay, good morning, guys. I want to welcome you to day 7 of our buyer boot camp. Today we have Freddie Ginther with Bridgeport Appraisal with us today. He's going to be our Ask the Appraiser. Any kind of questions that you have, but I'm going to let him do his little presentation first to let us know about contingencies and timelines is one of our agendas for our boot camp, so you guys can understand the process that we go through and how important it is for realtors to be involved in the appraisal process. So he's going to let us know, exactly what an appraiser is, why it's so important to have an appraisal done, and then, of course, the appraisal process. And then we're going to get into how to handle if the appraisal comes in low, how we use that for our negotiations. And then we'll have a Q&A session, and as well as give you some homework, which is what I kind of do at the end of all of our training sessions. So I'm actually going to stop sharing and give you some, there we go. So you should be able to share your screen now, Freddie, and then I'll let you take it away and tell us what an appraiser does.
All right. Hey, thank you. Appreciate it, Emily.
Yeah.
Um, let's see if that goes up there.
Yep. There you go.
Okay. I wonder how to get these back. That's all right. My other screen went away. Hello. Yeah. Thanks, Emily. My name is Freddie Ginther. Work with Bridgeport Appraisal. We've been in the Chattanooga, North Georgia, this area for about 3 years now. I'll tell you a little bit about the company um, as we get going here. And I'm just thankful for the opportunity to just be able to share with you guys all the things that Emily talked about, why we do appraisals, what's the process like um, during this period in the real estate transaction. We've got inspection contingencies, appraisal contingencies, and it might feel like helpless a little, like what do I do? I'm just waiting for these responses, waiting for the good news to come back, not the bad news, which is totally understandable. But just to give you some more tools and to give you some different things, language differences, and um, ways to talk to appraisers and to make them feel really good about themselves so you get what you want. Not a foolproof plan, but definitely, I definitely believe that we will not rise to the level of our aspirations. We typically will fall to the level of our preparation. So the more we can prepare for these moments, prepare for a low appraisal, prepare for this process, prepare our clients for them. I also have a real estate license, very recent. I'm super new, so any advice y'all have for me, I would love it. Um, but just preparing people for this part of the transaction. You've found the house, you put the offer and you got it accepted. Everything's exciting, and just really helping them keep a good understanding of what's going on. And really, my goal is just to add value to you and being able to feel like you've got a really good understanding and can communicate that effectively to your clients in order to just set the stage really well for this process. So super excited to be able to be here and share. Bridgeport Appraisal, that's who we work with. The company, let's see here. I think yeah, this is a little bit about us. Um, Sorry, I thought this was the next slide, but that's all right. My name is Freddie Ginther. I was born in Boise, Idaho, went to school in Oregon. This is a little background just so you can be like, who the heck is this guy? Why should I listen to him? Why should I trust him? Because my family's cute. That's why you should trust me. That's the only reason. I met my wife in Oregon and we got married in 2013. We have three little boys. It's actually 9, 6, and 3 now. And we've been in Chattanooga since early 2021, where we moved down to start the branch. The original branch is still open of Bridgeport in the Seattle area. We have appraisers up there. I still do work up there with like new construction and investor things up there. It is founded by Rob Ronick, who's actually my father-in-law. Nepotism, I know to the T, but enjoyed doing it. He offered me a job, and I just really enjoyed the process. He's been appraising. He's actually in Chattanooga now too. He's starting to do more work. He's been building a house for a few years, which has taken up a lot of his time. And he's kind of more client relations, business building, but he's done everything. Anything you can think about an appraiser or an appraisal, he's seen it, he's done it. So that's sort of like my go-to resource is Rob if I need anything. It's been a family business, owned and operated, 30 plus years. Um, yeah, that's just a little bit about us. And I like starting off this when I talk to agents. It's just asking the question like, hey, can we be friends? Like you running your business, we're running our business. We work together. We're crossing paths all the time. I want to add value to you and your business. And I don't think maybe it's more like just in like the atmosphere of like, hey, we should butt heads, or I just exist to ruin your job and life. And I don't, I promise you that. And I'm sorry if it ever feels that way. And some appraisers may. I don't speak for all of us. I just speak for us and this company here. So yeah, but we should totally be friends. We should be able to talk about things. We should be able to communicate in ways. There shouldn't feel like I know that there's rules on how we can talk and communicate, but if we're not talking value, it's like specific numbers, we can communicate and we should. I, as an appraiser, call the listing agent and the buyer's agent on all my deals that are sells to just try and get a feel of what's going on, let them know who I am, when I'm going out, all the things. If your appraisers aren't doing that, I know that's not typical. Um, and I'm trying to help kind of cultivate that here in this area. But it just makes the whole process easier if we're on the same page, in terms of what your expectations of an appraiser should be. So an appraisal, what is an appraisal? The basics are, and I don't know, Emily, I'm sorry. If there's like, we're just saving questions for the end, right? You don't, or do you want me to stop each slide? Is that probably not the way to do it?
Oh, sorry. I was trying to get it to unmute. It wouldn't let me unmute there.
That's
No,
okay.
whatever. If any of the people on the call have a question, you certainly can unmute or stick it in the chat, but you can just
Yeah.
continue on as you go. And then if anything pops up, I'll let you know.
Okay. Perfect. I appreciate that. And I wanted to just let you guys be able to interrupt me if I say anything that's
Oh, trust
silly
me,
or you need.
I will. No.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. Appraisal basics. Here's the kind of five steps of appraising. Number one, identify the problem. And we'll talk about each one of these really briefly. And then most of the benefit for you guys is in the Q&A and just sort of hearing like how I think through um, analyzing all the data. So identify the problem. That's going to be the first step. Two is determine the scope of work. What do we need to do this well? Number three, collect data. Where are we getting it? How are we getting it? Can we trust it? All that good stuff. Four, analyze it. Analyze the data. Look at it. Put it in the forms that we have. That kind of just sort of however you look at data, whether it's a CMA, it's kind of like an appraisal form. Um, and then form an opinion of value. Is pretty basic for the most part of what we're dealing with. So what is the problem? The identifying the problem, first step is the intended user. Most of the time, and you guys are in a buyer boot camp, so most of the time the intended user is the lender and the seller. So the buyers are not on you don't see the appraisal. So the intended user is the oh, I'm so sorry. It's the other way around. It's the
Yeah.
other way around. See, I don't know everything or anything. That's not true. But
Well, now
um,
in your defense, sometimes pre-sales, I know that sellers do get pre-sale appraisals as
appraisals.
well.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
in that case, yes, it would be the benefit of the seller. So
Totally.
you are right
Yes.
about that.
Yes. I'm so sorry. Buyer's boot camp. You're gonna get the appraisal back because you want to know, um, is this thing worth it? Does this make sense? Is it a sound investment? All those things. Uh, I wrote the purpose of an appraisal. I like to say it like this, to the appraisal comes up and we're just hoping it goes the right way. And I know we're messing with people's money and it's really exciting. Ironically, the very first listing I had as a agent came in with a low appraisal. So I totally like very first one, it was like years of just retribution rained down upon me.
Karma.
Hey, I ended up getting it reviewed and figured out, and I'd love to share the tools with how I did that. So we'll get there.
Yeah.
But you think about if your cousin came to you and they said, hey, I need $40,000 to buy a truck, and you've got $40,000, and so they say, hey, we're going to pay you back. You like them, they're your cousin, whatever, and so you're like, okay, great, and you sleep on it, and the next day you wake up, and now you've got questions because $40,000 is a lot of money. One question would be like, what's the truck, you know? And if they showed you a listing for a 1957 like Chevy five window vintage rehab truck, and then your next question is it worth it? And so you'd look up all the data because now it's your money, right? They're going to say, I really want this truck. And you ask the question, what kind of truck do you want to buy? It's really, what kind of truck do I want to buy? So we got to look for the lenders. Like they want to know, what am I getting into, right? People are borrowing a lot of money. Um, and as agents, you guys have the ability and the power and the joy to help people like make a really good investment. And that's part of the process where um, you guys got in this to help people, right? Help people find their homes, help people make good decisions, and a really important process of understanding um, the help that you can provide, right? It's like I know we start everyone, you start calculating out what's 2.5% of this, and that's totally reasonable and exciting and should be a really exciting part of your job. But the other side is somebody's giving out $500,000 and they want to know what kind of truck am I getting? And if your cousin came back and they showed you the vintage truck or they showed you a 2024 Dodge Ram, like you have different thoughts, right? Like, can I sell this later? Is the market big enough? What's the depreciation value? Is it going to appreciate, right? And I know that vehicles and houses not great, but it just sort of helps put the appraisal in terms that we can like understand. Even if someone said I need $5,000 for a car, it's like, okay, maybe that changes how you think about it, but you still want to know what are we investing into? So that's the basic purpose of an appraisal, understanding that the person lending the money wants a really good explanation of why they should lend that money. And that's a super important part that you're not excluded from. You're a part of it. And you can set up your buyers to understand like, you know, if a house is listed for 300,000 and they don't have quite the money to cover, so you go 315 and put 315 in concessions and you get a little appraisal back. That's not just, even if the appraisal could appraise at 315, understanding this side, and this is where I want to add value to you guys, the feds are starting to crack down on concessions on sales. They want to start looking at it. They ping a automated every appraisal, excuse me,
It's
I
okay.
send out goes to a automated like checklist. Like I don't know if it's AI or what, but it just like goes through and it'll just like start pinging red flags on things. And we have to be able to answer those questions. So understanding the full process of what you're going into is going to better set the expectations for your clients. We'll talk about types of value. There's like most of what we're doing is what is this house worth the day the appraiser goes out. There's retrospective and prospective, and we don't have to deal with those. Nope. Relevant characteristics. What does the house have? Agents love, and it's not a bad metric, love price per square feet, but understanding where is that value coming from? If you have an 800 square foot house and a 1,200 square foot detached barn and mother-in-law, and it's like an amazing landscape, and it's sold for a bunch, and you're like, this is 290 a square foot because the house is only 800 square feet. It's the price per square foot is kind of a real basic view of what is adding that value. What part of it? Is it the view? Is it the location? Is it the updates? Is it the basement? Is it the mother-in-law? Like what's adding to it, right? So price per square foot is a real good up into a
Generic.
point.
Yeah.
Up into a point. Right. So when you
I use it mainly to give my buyers and sellers more of a, hey, we don't want to go, $300 per square foot on this 1978 build because this is the reasons why. So I kind of use it as a layman's terms type uh,
yeah,
part of my CMA, not necessarily to add value to it, but just so they can understand where I'm coming from on the layman's side.
Absolutely. And I don't even mean to like relevate to that to like layman, like I'm an appraiser. I don't care about price per square foot, you know?
Oh,
But
no, we're
it's
fine.
but our job is to understand where that value is coming from.
Right.
So if you have a D.R. Horton home in a D.R. Horton neighborhood, your price per square foot is going to be really accurate. It's going to be really, really good. You get outside of that, and it's, you got a full brick split foyer versus, kind of an older. You just have a bunch of different characteristics that we've got to take
Add
into
into that, yeah.
consideration. Right. We're identifying the problem. And the problem that is actual appraisal terms when they take you through the courses and use PAP. It is called identifying the problem. Identifying the problem sounds like it's a weird way to say like figuring out what are we trying to answer on this? Like, here's the property. What are we trying to answer? And then the last thing I always put on there is meatballs. If you get a property that's like I said, you have a single wide on 22 acres, and it's the trailer is worth, or the manufactured home's, worth $20,000, and then they have an $80,000 riding arena, and they just live their life to board and train horses. Like that's a meatball appraisal. Like what are we comparing that to? What does that look like? And so going into all the situations where in your head you're thinking there's no comps, that's what I would call a meatball. And that's not a bad thing. We get really creative with how we answer those problems, but understanding going into that, this isn't the easiest property to value. This isn't the standard, um, sort of plug and play, or again, answering it with a simple like price per square foot or price per square acre, things like that. We have to get really creative with that. And uh, starting to think that way as you're going into the buying process, now you're trying to answer questions before they even come up, and you could be super helpful and add a lot of value to the appraiser doing that one as well. Number two, the scope of work. A typical inspection is show up to the property, exterior, interior photos, sketch it. So we're checking the square footage. A lot of questions come up about this, like above and below grade. If you have questions on that, we can totally answer those when questions come up. There is ANSI standards for how we have to measure homes and how we get graded in measuring homes. If we don't complete the sketch to ANSI standards, we get flagged, potential we get kicked off the list, potential we get fined. Like there's a lot of things that go into that. So yes, your split level is on grade with the backyard. We can't put it above grade. It's not my choice. It is the ANSI standards of what we have to do. So um, a lot of this going through here, and I'm not trying to defend my industry, even though I will a little bit, but helping you guys have a little bit more grace for the what we're up against as well. We're not just here trying to blow up deals or say like I've got the answers and I know, so this is what it is. Um, but we're held to a standard, and there's like serious consequences by not adhering to those on our end. So sometimes you get older, kind of grizzled appraisers who they're just staying under the radar and doing everything to the T, and they call everything in a ridiculous amount because they just can't afford or don't want to
Because
get.
their word is law, yeah.
Yes, because their word is law. And they're not willing. There is, I say wiggle room. I don't know if wiggle room's the right thing. There's creative ways to solve problems. And the easiest way is to just pump something out that you didn't expand the market, you didn't go back in time, you didn't, and I'm speaking for appraisers right now, you didn't really explore everything that you could do to try and solve this problem,
Yeah.
because that gets you into questions. Then people questions, why'd you do that? Why'd you think of that? Why did you use this comp? Why didn't you use that comp? And if you don't have really good answers for that, then your credibility goes out, and you get dinged for things, and you get enough dings and you get kicked off the FHA rotation and the VA rotation, and they don't want to deal with that. So
I do
um,
like for some of my newer agents out there, or even our seasoned agents that don't know some of this, this would be a good thing for you is that, and I didn't know this until I met Freddie. really. And I knew it, but it's kind of like, it was my aha moment when I was at that mastermind with you. Uh, and appraisers have their inspection portion too. It's not like coming out and looking at the house. That's not the appraisal. And we all say, oh, the appraisal's scheduled. No, the inspection part of the appraisal is scheduled. Then he's got all these other pieces that he has to go through to get to the actual appraisal report. And so just knowing the terminology and being able to explain that to your buyers and sellers as the process goes is going to make you a lot more valued as an agent because you're now educating your buyer and seller more so than any other agent has ever done in the past, is knowing the terminology so you can explain it to them.
Absolutely. That's a great point. And again, one of these things where you're totally right. If I do it again, catch me on it. If I say things that I've just been saying for the past 12 years, and it's just normal to me, like, yeah, um, I need to be able to put it into words that or explain things and not just think we're speaking the same language. So thank you for that. If I do that again, let me know.
Oh, no, no. We do it
Um,
too with lenders. It's like lenders have their terminology and their terms
yes.
mean the same
Yeah.
thing that our terms do. It's like
Right.
you go back and forth. No, no, yeah, yeah.
Right. Yes, totally. And you're so right. The more your breadth of knowledge is expanded into every aspect of real estate, the
Exactly.
way more confident you're going to be to go to your clients and say, here's what's going on, here's the process. Um, and it just helps keep everyone informed, right? Like high level of communication is super desirable in being a buyer's agent. So absolutely. Scope of work, some properties come up that I have to have a certain certification for, or I might not even be competent to do. So, there's certain things where you as an appraiser just like raise your hand and say, I do not have the experience or competence to do this. And um, that's totally okay. And so there's certain things, again, probably be a meatball. Scope of work, relevant characteristics. We kind of already talked about that in the problems, figuring out what is adding value to this home and how are we going to best bracket that? And by bracket that, again, I said it. By bracket that, I mean on on homes and appraisals, at the very bottom of them, if you look, it'll have two check boxes. One says plus, one says minus. That
Mhm.
means the top number, you're using a comparable, it sold at 300. After all the adjustments, it adjusts down to 295. It would be a negative adjustment. And then you have appraisal or another comp at 275, it adjusts up. And then you would have a positive and negative. You on page one of an appraisal, you have to have at least one comp going up and one comp coming down. Um,
Oh, good to know that. I didn't know that.
so if you open up an appraisal and all the bottom boxes are going one direction, you can say, hey, they might just shuffle things around from the second page of the comps, but
But still, it's
that's
good to know that if you have six comps and they're all going in the same direction, that's not a good
that's
appraisal.
not good. Not a good appraisal
Good
at
to
all. Yeah.
know.
And they should be dinged on it for sure. So
Yeah.
and then scope of work again, meatball. If it's a crazy property, it's going to be a crazy property. Collecting data, obviously we use the MLS. There is a boilerplate uh, comment in all appraisals, and it's basically like all relevant data of publicly available is trusted to be accurate and the best we can do. So if you sold a home and the square footage is different, the only square footage the appraiser can grab data from is the county. They typically have to go with that. You can have caveats there, but um, so we trust MLS data, whatever that means. Is if that's scary or exciting to you, you got to be a little bit. Some people bury all the square footage in the above, and you can clearly tell it's not. So we try and do a little bit more digging to delineate. County information, this is another thing. Agents, I call all the agents. I want to know what you're thinking. The very first time I call on all the listing agents, I ask them the same question. Are you worried about this? And if you are, be honest and be like, yeah, but don't just say, yeah, what are you going to do about it? Like, have the answers that you can to the question. If you're the buyer's agent and you're feeling like, if you have the ability to just say, I'm not too worried about it, but here's what we saw. Here's where our thought process is coming from. That's super helpful. And then again, hopefully I'm adding some tools in your tool belt where you can say, here's what we saw and here's how we think it's going to affect the appraisal. Um, and where you can kind of go that one step beyond price per square foot and you're adding like this one had a detached garage. We found this one that did. We went a little bit farther back and found this one. You're giving them actual ammo to be able to use in the appraisal. Besides, um, the one across the street had the same price per square foot because maybe that is a great comp. Maybe it's not, but it had the same price per square foot, and there's a good way to delineate that. So,
I look at those phone calls as help me help you help the buyer and seller.
totally. And I, as the appraiser, and again, I don't speak for everybody. I love real estate. I love when things work out. I want buyers to get into their home and be happy. I also want them to be smart and be well informed. Um, and so pushing something that may not be able to be pushed is uh, we might run into that, and you will. You'll have low appraisals, and that's okay, and it's the normal. It shouldn't be too often, but when they happen, I'm hoping you guys will feel better about how we can respond to those. So,
So let me ask
um,
you this, Freddie.
yeah,
So I typically, as a realtor, I use RPR for my CMA. So it's a software that NAR put out for free for all real estate agents to be able to use. It's called RPR. And it basically helps me to pull in all comp houses. But here's the funny thing is it actually pulls in um, regular sales that were for sale by owner to unrepresented buyers. So they're not on the MLS. So
yeah.
I look at for a couple of things on that particular uh, comp to make sure, hey, this was actually listed on the MLS, or hey, this one was not listed on the MLS, because I have heard tale that you guys as appraisers don't typically use anything that was not listed on the MLS for comparisons. Is that a true statement?
Again, don't speak for everybody. I would, especially if I needed to, if it made sense. The one thing you're not getting, and again, this is answered by like a phone call, right? So we can, if we can reach out and try and talk to somebody, and if you hear like, oh my my son wanted to buy the house, and then it's like, okay, well maybe it was discounted, and so that's
True.
and that happens on the MLS too, where you see a house listed and it sold for under, and then I call the agent and they say, oh yeah, it was motivated seller, and they ended up selling to a friend, or that's not an arm's length transaction, not a good comp. It's not reflecting a free market, right? They're
Or if I bought
motivated
it for
incentive.
myself and I took the compensation that you were going to give me to give back to the seller so they'll lower the price for me, that's not a good comp either, because it's not a standard commission based that all the other houses around it were.
I've actually not been in that situation,
It's
which is
happened.
interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I believe you. I'm not saying it hasn't. I just haven't, and I don't know how I deal with that.
Well,
But
'cause
you're right. You get into anything that's sort of outside an arm's length transaction. You have equally motivated buyers and sellers. Sellers want to sell for the highest they can. Buyers want to buy for the best price they can. They come together. It's been on the market, and the result of that should not should be is what you would like say this was at least on the free market, whether
right,
the value of what they all think is
right.
able to be backed up or not, and that's a hard thing to say, right? You
It
have a
is.
house
Well,
listed and 8 people show
exactly.
up
Well, and it's
and
also how it's closed too. So follow me on this, guys, and we'll talk more about this tomorrow when we get with Carly with Priority Title. Is when you actually close the transaction on the MLS, it's going to ask you, were there concessions? What were the concessions? How much were the concessions? Because though that data actually shows up for Freddie, because if he's got two houses that are perfect comps for your house and they're in the same neighborhood, same size, same shape, same everything, and one was listed for, and they were both listed at, like, let's just say 290. One had $0 for seller concessions, but the other one gave like 25,000 for concessions. He uses that data to help get a better value for you on that report, because now it's not the same.
Mhm. Totally. Yeah. Yes. That's a great point on just doing your best to fill out everything on the MLS to the best of your ability and knowledge and double checking,
Yeah.
because it's super helpful. So yeah, that's kind of how we collect data. I am able to speak with peer appraisers. Excuse me. So I had one that my first time, it was like right in North Georgia. It was probably like 5 miles south of it, kind of towards Chatsworth.
Mm.
And it was a new construction manufactured home on like 5 acres. And there was zero comps. And the lender, great local lender, was like, "Hey, you can go to Tennessee." And I was like, if the only answer to this value is to go to a different state, and I'm again thinking in my mind, I'm new to this, I'm new to that issue. Um, in my immediate thought is, if I have to go to a different state to make this work, then it's obviously not worth it, right? You're dealing with two different economies, two different things, even though the distance is 12 miles, you're in a different state.
Mm.
And she said, "No, I got this appraiser, call him up." And I was able to call him, and he was this awesome appraiser who gave me great information. I said, "Can I put your name in?" He said, "Yes." I said, "Can I put your license number in?" He said, "Yes." So it's like a lot of it was just learning. And that's something that we try and do here at Bridgeport, is to be the most informed we can be, which means, hey, call somebody who's worked in North Georgia for 30 years and who can say, "I do it all the time. It's never been an issue," and then you can just, anyway. So that's another big data point that we get to use, especially on more difficult properties. Um, Oops, did I miss one there? I
Analyze, I
think I
think.
did. Analyze. Okay. Yes, I went from gather data to analyze. Um, Analyzing data. Let's see. What do you guys want to know about that on the buyer's side? We've been talking about a lot of it, right? Um, how we look at comps, how they go in. So in the appraisal, it's going to have above and below grade. It's going to have a above and below grade bedroom count, bathroom counts. Those could be adjusted for at the same, at different. Again, that's sort of based on your appraisal you get. I make a difference to adjust my below square footage less than the above grade. How much that is kind of depending on where we are in the where it is. If all the comps are split levels, it doesn't matter. As long as you're consistent, like you could adjust at whatever per square foot. As long as it's consistent throughout the report, you should be good. Or I feel really good about it. Um, but understanding that, so if you have a split level and the only comps that make it work for you are 2 stories, you're probably, I won't say, yeah, most likely. If I was an appraiser, I came in low, you sent me comps that were 2 stories to adjust to a split level, and I've got what I think are 4 or 5 really good split level comps, tri levels, maybe even 1 story over basement, and you send me a 2 story, I am not going to take that comp seriously. And again, I don't want to speak rudely. I'll say this one story because you need to know this when you're dealing with this, because you have a lot of ability to influence what's going on more than you know. And if you come with good information, if you come with legitimate comps, you should be and will be taken seriously. Appraisers hate being wrong. I know they're the worst. We're the worst. But if you can say, I think you might be off here, and here's why, and give them a legitimate comparable, they will take you seriously, because the lender, now you got the lender involved, and I'm not saying you want to start a big huff over it, but if you're like feel strongly about a couple comps, like absolutely, you need to send that over to them. They need to be aware. Like, I think you missed it, and here's why. But I had one that was in Harrison, right off of 58, and was not able to bring it in, and the agent went in, pulled a radius, clicked everything that they thought they needed, sent me 2 comps. One of them was across the river in Hickson. And it was like he just pulled a circle, put in what he thought he needed to make work, found the 2 comps that said this is worth it, didn't even look and send them to me. And in my head, I think you're not doing your best right now. You're not doing your best. And And Emily, I know that you've got a team of excellence and you want to have competent agents who feel like they know what they're doing and know what they're talking about and feel confident coming to that, because it is a interesting call to be like, I think you're wrong. But if you're just going to put the minimum amount of effort into finding something to solve a problem, you're going to get the results that you don't want.
Right.
You know,
You get out what you put in. But here's what I would suggest to all of our agents, regardless if they're new or seasoned agents, is at and I got this from a very dear broker friend of mine who passed away a few years ago. At the point that the contract is accepted and you're now fully executed contract status, right?
Mhm.
You and the seller agent, or you and the buying agent, whichever case may be, you are now a team.
Yeah.
You need to be working together to get this to the closing table because you've already negotiated the price. You've already got all the negotiations done. Everything's already set in stone, so to speak. And you want to work together. And now you have a third team member coming in, the appraiser, and you need to make sure you guys are all on the same page. So I personally, I gather all the comps that I use to come up with that price initially. I even make a list of all the things that that buyer or seller, or excuse me, that seller has done to the house because it may have been here at one point, but then he did all these things to bring it up to here. And Freddie doesn't know that, right? So I make a list of everything that that seller did to upgrade that house. And I take it to the appraisal appointment, to the inspection appointment, and I meet with Freddie. I shake his hand. I introduce myself. I'm very pleasant to be around. I give him the information, but I also, guys, ask questions. I tell you this every single week. That is the biggest tool in your toolbox is to ask questions. So that way you become more knowledgeable on how does this appraiser work? How does that appraiser work? Oh, wow, this appraiser is going to be different. So it just really all depends on the area, the appraiser you're dealing with, and the data that you have. Because, like he said, this agent's pulling data that's not relevant and then just sending it to this appraiser, which I hate to admit can tick off a lot of appraisers. So you want to make sure that you guys are all on the same page going in. So keep that in mind that you're on the same team.
Yeah, totally agree. And I want to feel like I'm on your team too. Like I want to be like, yeah, you guys nailed this. You did it. And from the majority of the time, you guys do. You guys are knowledgeable and experienced, and the data's out there. And buyers and sellers, they're not stupid. They understand. There's a lot of things out there. Zillow saying this, Redfin saying this. Whether you believe in that or not, it's like there's a lot of information for people to feel one strongly. And I would say for the vast majority of my appraisals, I'm like, I mean, it's like really small percentage that we can't figure out.
Yeah.
Um, and I give that a credit to working with a lot of great agents, and then to our team and for what we do here, which is like we really work hard to try and figure it out, right?
Yeah.
Because
Knowledge is power.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot of information out there, and it's easy to miss things. I get into up in Cleveland or Athens, right? And you've got East Tennessee, Chattanooga, Rivers County. You got three MLSs. Some are on some comps are on the other, some comps aren't anywhere. It's
Real
like, what
track.
the heck's going on? Real tracks.
Yeah.
So yeah, I could miss a comp, right? And I again, if I can't figure it out, it's like, what am I missing? Show me something, and I will be very specific with what I need. I need a house
Exactly.
right here in this vintage, sold within the 12 months, similar square footage. Anyway, I get very specific with what I need, not just send me what you looked at, and ask your appraiser, get really specific. What do we need to make this work? Because again, I said we have to have things coming up and down, right? Comps going both ways. So if they say we need something that's sold at or above your contract price, similar square footage, similar vintage, that's the comp you're sending, right? You don't need to send them anything else because that's what they told you. Like get really specific with your questions. What comp would make this work? And then go find it. Or if it's not there, then understand like, man, he's he's got to do his job, she's got to do her job, and you might just not have it, and that's okay. It's not your fault. But to have all the knowledge to do to the best of your abilities, put forth the best comps possible. Super helpful. And I appreciate agents that show up or that email me comps, that email me things. Honestly, for the most part, we end up not needing it. But the times that you do, it's super helpful. And you've already done your homework. You're answering questions before they come up, which is,
But in that respect too, it's like I had the one in Cleveland that we were talking about before the call.
mhm,
I was asking the appraiser when I went there because I pulled my comps and I was like, here you go, this is what I came up with. And he's like, well, I can't use this one because of this reason, or I can't use this one because of this reason. And so he was basically telling me at that point, split foyer to split foyer, because there's so many in the area that he can use split foyer to split foyer that he doesn't need the two stories, right?
mhm.
He doesn't need the split level, which is different than a split foyer. So it's kind of like you said, like with like, and the more like with like that you can get, the more accurate your analysis is going to be.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'll also throw this out there. You might just run across an appraiser who's just not going to take anything that you say. They don't care. They've had the sort of the attitude that you said, Emily, like I said it and it's law and you can deal with it and my job's done.
But until you
Um,
meet with them, you have no idea how they are.
totally. Totally. Yeah. Yeah. Catch a lot more bees with honey, sort of
Yeah.
feeling. The last thing I put on here on analyze data before meatball is horses, not zebras. When you put everything into the grid, I'm not, it's really hard to come up with like elaborate things of what's going on. So like if it looks like it and it acts like it and it smells like it, that's where it's at, you know. So when we try and get things where um I had an agent called, a really, really cool guy, super awesome agent in the area, and he was like, we've this older condo. I think it's like I want to call it a 2 bedroom. It's a 1 bedroom. And honestly, I told him like you can put what you want, if the appraiser shows up and that's the tough part is like we can get creative in the report where it's like, hey, this is a 1 bedroom, but it's got this extra room. And even though there's not an egress, it lives like it can't call it on there. But so yeah, horses, not zebras. Like the least complicated answer is probably going to be where they're going to go. So if you're banking on an appraiser valuing hoof sounds as a zebra, I wouldn't do that. It's gonna go to kind of the least common denominator. And then the opinion value. We get the exact contract price. That's right. We hit it every single time. The
Usually within $5,000, right?
which actually makes me more frustrated.
It
The
makes me laugh every time.
I had a conversation with a good buddy of mine from church, and he is an attorney in the area. And it was like when we first met, and he asked me what I did. I told him, and he's like, "Oh, so you come at contract price every time?" And it was like he was giving me grief for my industry. I was like, "Dude, you got the most made fun of industry like ever. You're an attorney, like come on." So yes, if your appraiser comes in right at the contract price and you want to roll your eyes and think like, "Oh, of course they did. This is a waste of time or silly,"
Especially
you
when
can
it's
think,
$300,300 and 29 cents or something, some kind of weird number, and it comes in exactly at price. You're like,
okay, yeah.
okay.
Yes. You can tease as much as you want, but number one, be happy. We got it figured out for you. And
Good.
number two, some appraisers think like what we talked about. If you have equal buyer, equal seller, they're negotiating at the best they can. And the contract price, it's supported, but it's not worth more than that, or else it would have, that might be their thinking. If it's worth more than this, it should have sold more than this. Um, and so maybe you've got a house that sold at 399.98, and maybe all their comps say this thing's 405. And they think in their head, well, maybe it would have been, if it should have been 405, it should have been 405. And anyway, so giving them a little bit of the benefit of the doubt, I try and get the value not directly on, but where it needs to be. And then again, I put meatball on all of these, that those are just the curveballs that are going to be, don't be afraid of them as an agent, but just be aware of that through the whole process of an appraisal. There's going to be some that there are no comps. It is in the middle of nowhere, or it's unique, or it's over improved, or it's dilapidated, whatever it might be. There's just one of those things where it's like I can't figure this out.
A nine
We
hundred
feel
thousand dollar house in a $150,000 neighborhood.
right. Yeah. Like we feel the same way. Like we're so
I
again, we're
had
on the
that.
same team. Let's figure it out together. Um, and that's how we come to the opinion of value really quickly. And we'll get to questions here. I want to be cognizant of your time. Different types of appraisals. Conventional appraisal, that's a certain amount of percent down. Getting into too much lender talk, and I will get lost beyond too much. So I don't want to get like over my skis there. But conventional, typically a certain percentage down, certain criteria that they're meeting, loan to value, all those different things. Um, Appraisals are pretty standard there. Nothing really we have to be majorly aware of. Obviously, on those ones, the biggest thing is safety and security. If something's broken, if something's dangerous, we got to call it out. So when you see subject to handrail, subject to this broken window, it's going to be pretty typical on conventional things like that. Safety and security. Those are the two things you want to be aware of as listing and buyer's agents. FHA and USDA federally backed loans. This is a lot of people, right? A lot of people. Homes are expensive. A lot of people putting a little bit down, trying to get into there and make it work. FHA requires a head and shoulders inspection, and that's like a phone into the attic and a crawl. If there's like, I'm not a home inspector, and I don't claim to be. I've
So you don't
built a
have to
lot of
like do
homes.
the army crawl through the crawl space and take.
No, praise the Lord, I don't have to do that. The but I've been around building a lot my whole life, grew up in construction, built homes, things like that. So I know what I'm looking at, and it's basically if it looks funky, we're gonna have to ask a question about it. If there's sitting water, we're gonna have to ask a question about it. If there's a black spot on the roof, we're gonna have. But I'm not inspecting everything. If I stick my head up and I can't see anything, that's the extent of those. Just so you're aware, the both of those, the FHA and USDA, they're a little bit more strict on safety and security, peeling paint, exposed wires. Like if you get into like Emily, what would you like a grade C to D home? I don't, you do those?
Yeah.
How would you say like do you do that in your brokerage?
As far as,
Just talking about sort of like general properties, like, oh, this is a D property or something like,
well,
do you give them
yeah,
great?
yeah, more of like if it's like new construction, resale that's, dilapidated, or resale that's been upgraded, and then of course, you're unlivable,
Right. You're
type
just sort of
thing.
tired.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And like I tell all of my buyers, sellers, and agents, FHA actually and USDA and VA actually has two pieces to it in my opinion. It's is the buyer available or qualified for those loans, but also is the house qualified to accept
Yes.
that loan. So that's what Freddie's
It's a
there.
great way to
Yeah,
think about it.
yeah,
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. That's a really good way to think about it. I'm gonna write that down. Two
yeah.
parts to it.
Two parts:
Um,
buyer, seller, and house.
and house. Yes. And not all homes qualify. And that's just the
Exactly.
reality.
Well,
And
and I don't know if a lot of my agents on the call know this either, is there's actually a third leg to that stool for FHA. And that is the owner of the seller of the house, have they owned it for 91 days or more? So
right.
they have not
Yes.
owned for 91 days or more, then FHA cannot apply to the house, even though the buyer qualifies for FHA. So there's
Correct.
little pieces to it that we got to be aware of on the back end too.
Yes. Yeah. And well, I say that
A
if
lot.
you're a well-informed listing agent and you are doing a rehabbed flip or something like that, that's like box number one. How long have we owned it? And then you can just put that in there. No FHA, no FHA. And then another type of appraisal is a VA loan. This is the mastermind that I did last year. You were at Emily, and
Yes.
we talked a lot about VAs. I work with the VA, love the VA. Obviously, excited that we have a pretty well-run program, I would say, for our veterans to
So,
get them into homes and to help them out and to make that next big step that they so deserve really attainable.
mhm.
And the VA loan process, I'll tell you about the couple of things that make me really excited about it. and you shouldn't be afraid of it either if you're representing a VA loan or accepting one. They are less restrictive than the other federally backed loans. So utilities do not even have to be on for me to go out. No water, no electrical, no nothing. And I can't say you got to have these on. On VA or FHA and USDA, got to have all the utilities on, got to be functional, got to be able to test the, the plumbing, the electrical, the heat, all those things. Um, the only real things, and there is a chapter 12 minimum property requirements. You can just Google VA chapter 12 minimum property requirements for an appraisal. It's probably 12 pages that is very clear. Like, here's what the appraiser can and can't call. Anything cosmetic, we don't have anything to do with it. Can't do it. Can't call it. The main things are, again, safety, security, peeling paint and exposed wood. Like, those kind of go hand in hand. Those are big for them, and exposed wires. So be super confident in those appraisals. I enjoy them a lot. The other thing about VAs, which is great, and this is how, if I can encourage you to think of anything, think of all appraisals like this. Like, you're a part of the team. So it's called Tidewater, which means if I open up a report, if I open up a property and I immediately think, I start looking for comps, this is a meatball, can't find anything, this is going to come in low. I initiate Tidewater. Every member who wants to be a part of this just gets to start sending me comps. It's supposed to be a little bit more organized, but it's basically like, let's review this value before I even figure this out. I need help. And you guys can send comps and say, here's what we saw. So if you've done your homework well, you've priced it well, you've informed your buyers well of like, here's why I think this house is worth it, you should be super confident in VA loans being able to say, no, 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 you need to look at this. Don't miss this, things like that. So, and to take that mindset into your other appraisal reports, other inspection contingency periods will be super helpful. It's just, you're not helpless. You're not helpless in that period. You can do some homework. You can understand better the market. You can understand better the neighborhood. You can understand better the quality and condition. You can communicate with the appraiser, ask questions. Maybe they're not all the nicest, but
You
for the
can add
most part,
value.
everyone here has been super nice and helpful to me. So,
You can add value to that appraisal process.
yes, absolutely. And when you come into that competent and you can speak a little bit of the language and you can let them know like we're on the same team, and if agents have thoughts about appraisers definitely have thoughts about agents, and you can dispel some of those myths that you like,
Well,
and be super helpful.
if I can share one thing is I
Yeah.
actually went through Tidewater last year on one of my listings. Okay.
Hmm.
So the buyer was on the other side and they were VA. And immediately after the inspection of process for the appraiser, he sends out a message to the lenders calling for Tidewater.
Hmm.
And I had just gotten finished with Freddie's mastermind class. And so I get this email requesting Tidewater, and wait a minute, I know what to do. I couldn't believe it. I was like, I know what to do. So I didn't know exactly why he was calling Tidewater because it was a fairly seasoned agent or appraiser that I thought. And
Hmm.
so guess what I did? I picked up the phone. I called the appraiser going, can I just find out why exactly you're calling for Tidewater? Because it's like this is a pretty standard house. There's lots of comps around this house. Turns out that it was a 1960 something build, and all the same houses around it that have sold in the past 12 months were of the same style, but they were freshly, newly upgraded, not updated, but upgraded. I mean, they were like open concepts and they had all these new and improved amenities to the houses. But my listing was still in the well-maintained category. And so he needed to see if there was other well-maintained houses out there that he missed or
Hmm.
maybe that there's one that's like coming on the market and about to go close the next day or something of that nature. So he needed our expertise to help him find in the same category because he needed to make sure that value was accurate. So that was
Yes.
the one good reason why Tidewater came up, is because I got to learn more about it. I got my sellers what they needed. The buyer's agent got what the buyers needed, and everybody went home happy at Thanksgiving.
Let's
So
go.
there you go.
Awesome. Yes. Love me some Tidewater. Okay, that's basically appraisals. Appreciate y'all for being here and listening. A last encouragement I'll give you is um, just taking those next steps to be proficient, to be a pro in this market is going to separate you leaps and bounds from just anybody who got in and thought this was going to be easy or thought this was going to be not that much work. And I will say the growth period between starting to take these steps and to where it's just second nature will be way shorter if you do this on every deal. So even if it's a no-brainer, simple home, just putting this into practice of like answering the questions before they come up. Why do I think this value is there? Thinking outside of just price per square foot and what is the appraiser really going to look at? Is what characteristics do I think add value? What did my sellers or buyers say? We love it because of this.
Yeah.
That's a relevant characteristics that you should think, okay, they love that huge deck. So if
Mhm.
the appraiser comes in and there's no adjustments for outdoor living areas, and you look through and you're like, man, this is a tiny deck, this is an uncovered patio, there's nothing close to what we have. And we felt like this added a lot of value. You're not going to maybe change exactly how much they change it on, but it'll give you the idea of saying, hey, this was a big deal for our buyers. Here's a comp that meets all these other criteria and it's got a big covered deck, things like that. It's just
If I could
gonna,
tell you one more thing about how valuable appraisals are, appraisals are extremely valuable when you go to resell the house after the appraisal's done. So like you have a house that you're trying to get listed, you go in, you measure the house just to kind of get an idea of what you're going to list the square footage at. You compare it to the previous listing at what the buyer, your seller bought it for. And then you also compare it to the tax records and you come up with 4 or 10 different numbers. I kid you not, it actually happens. I measured it, I came up with one number. I looked at the previous listing and it came up with another number. I looked at the tax records, I came up with another number. But the ultimate number that I need to work with is what the appraiser came up with. So my first phone call is to the seller going, hey, do you happen to have a copy of your previous appraisal so I can look at it? And they're like, their first question is why? What's wrong? What's going on? So I explained to them that, between the listing, my measurements, and the tax records, I'm coming in with 3 different numbers. So I need to know, and I'm talking significant difference, guys. I'm not talking like 5 or 10 square feet. I'm talking significant hundreds of square feet difference. And so I need to find out who the expert or what the number the expert came up with, because he's going to go out there and measure it too, especially if he's got a 1,500 square foot listing on the tax records and he gets out there and it's 5,000 square feet, right? He's going to need to confirm that 5,000 square feet is accurate. So that's the number
Right.
I'd go with, is what he came up with. So that's another piece that is of value to you for these appraisals. So make sure you know how to read them. Okay. So talk to an appraiser, see if they can send you a generic appraisal report that they kind of came up with just as an example, and
Yeah.
know how to do it, or reach out to seasoned agents like myself. And I'm like, here's one that I did on mine. But the one I love is where the appraiser, I had a 1/2 acre flat land and he compared it to another house exactly the same, right? But that house only had 0.2 acres fully wooded, and he gave them more value than me. So guess what I do is I question it. And I was actually able to have them reverse it just a little bit to give the value in the right position. So know how to read it and ask questions is all I got to say.
Very good. Love that.
Yeah. So does anybody on the call here have any questions, any comments that you want to throw out on the chat, or you can just unmute yourself and ask, because I know you guys probably have a lot of questions.
I do.
Go ahead, Hannah.
Okay, so I have a pretty much a meatball listing that is coming soon.
Let's go.
And but like in the pricing process, since there was no comparables,
Hmm.
um in the area, also it's a mobile home. So when I went back 3 months, there was four comparables, but they were distressed properties, no acreage, that kind of thing. So
Hmm.
um my sellers had gotten a HELOC appraisal in October. So but I called my lender and I was like talking to her about the value, if I should use that to help with my CMA. And she like said that sometimes they typically come in low. Do you think that is accurate?
That's a great question.
On It is a great question. Yeah, thanks, Hannah. On like a refi or a HELOC appraisal, is that what you're asking? Are those
Yeah.
two?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. So I don't know if I would say they come in lower. It depends on the things you have going on. I would imagine on a meatball when you don't have, and this is again, it'll change appraiser to appraiser. I put a lot of value on the listing, and I don't mean like the listing and listing price. I mean the fact that it hit the open market, that it's been on the day, like days on market is a big deal to me. If you have something where it's sold within a typical days on market, you had people come through. That's gonna give a really good. So if maybe his HELOC appraisal, I have no idea. I'm just throwing out a number. Maybe easy numbers. It says this thing's worth 100K, and then you put it on the market for 125 or whatever you might think, and it sells in 30 days. And even though there's like the comparables are really limited, I'm gonna try my best to like figure out what the heck's going on, because if everything's landed in a this is typical days on market, this is typical listing, you had fair represented sellers and buyers. I operate from the position of the market has spoken. Can I back it up to a lender? Not every appraiser operates that way. And so the reason I say they might come in lower is because when you're doing a HELOC or a refi, there is no free market. You're just going off of specifically the comps. You're just trying to say, I, you know, I don't know what people, I don't, I don't know what people would say.
Right.
So, and I don't mean that as like, I don't know, but that's specifically, I'm going off data. I'm not starting from any point of like, here's what somebody was willing to give them.
Right.
Um,
And that's kind of what
so
I was going to say was like you were saying is like we don't have a specific contract number that we're trying to reach.
mhm,
We're
yeah,
trying to reach at least 80 or 75% of what the
LTV, right.
LTV, yeah, the loan to value is. So if the loan is 100,000, we need to make sure that it appraises for at least 75,000, right? So it's kind of like, you know, where is the HELOC sit? It's kind of like
Okay.
setting the
Totally.
right price.
And
Okay.
that's a great point too, Emily, just to be like, I'm well informed. I want to do well for our clients. I'm not saying what do you need for it, but there's ways to understand like, base. I can see mortgage history. I understand where people are at on refis and on HELOCs. And um, anyway, so yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thank
Uh,
you.
Good luck with anything. Yeah, and one encouragement I give you, not all the time, pretty rarely can we go to a stick-built home, but if it's like truly nothing,
Yeah.
truly nothing for like 40, 50 miles, you might just need to start going bigger. Like,
You're like going 40 or 50 miles, and that's true. So I
yeah.
actually have like when I was out in Cleveland, he was looking for split foyers, not split levels. He would actually go out 5, 6 miles. So appraisers would much rather find like with like further out in the same 12-month period versus
Mhm.
going 18 months and sticking in the 3 mile radius or whatever the case may be. So
Yeah.
like with like, year with year, style with style, and go further out in distance within reason. I mean,
Mhm.
just keep that in mind.
That's a
Yeah.
great point. That's what I had to end up doing, because this particular listing is on a decent amount of unrestricted acreage, which is hard to come by in this area. So what I did was I found something with similar acreage, manufactured home, but it was a little bit farther out. It wasn't in the same type of area. So that's kind of
Mhm.
like how I started.
So
And then,
basically, you have to find other meatballs because
yeah.
same thing. I had a single wide manufactured home, but it had like this $50,000 barn, that they put with it. And so my friend was like, okay, what do I do? Where do I find comps? So we actually had to go find that meatball that matched this one to say, okay, this is how much this one sold for because it's the same meatball.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's
So
fun. It's
it
fun
is.
and exciting, and I really enjoy it. As silly as that sounds, I love working with people, but just being able to answer those that like first like identify the problem. What's the problem here? There ain't nothing that says it, and then we got to figure it out. And that's it's a challenge, and it's fun. So good
Exactly.
luck with it.
Yeah.
So thank you, Hannah. That's some great questions. And so now getting back to our PowerPoint presentation here. So just some homework for you guys. Again, I do this every week. I want you to guys add at least 5 to 10 people to your CMA, or excuse me, your CRM, to your leads, your follow-ups, and your referrals, and ask for at least 5 referrals. And again, guys, it's not just people that you want to get referrals from. You want to get referrals from your vendors. Maybe even reach out to a couple of appraisers and say, hey, can I buy you a cup of coffee? Can I buy you lunch and like pick your brain so I can become a better agent with my CMAs? Because you would find a lot of value out of picking the brain of an appraiser. That's why I try to ask the appraiser sessions a couple of times a year. Create at least 3 social media posts to go out there: Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, if it's still around, we don't know. And then remember, video and pictures add more words than words do. So make sure you're doing not only words, but you also want to do pictures and videos as well. Host at least 2 open houses this month. I'd love to see you guys add more buyers in a more organic way. And doing that is doing open houses. I don't expect you to do as many as I did in my first year, but getting it a couple of months, you'll get there eventually. Practice creating your CMA using RPR, figuring out where the meatballs are and things of that nature. This video is recorded, so I'll be sending this out to you guys. I'll get that chapter 12 information that Freddie was talking about earlier and give that as some of your cheat sheet in there. And I'll also send Freddie's contact information. And then here's a really good one: shadow another agent at an appraisal inspection. Go with them, see how the process is. Talk to that appraiser, ask questions, because especially if you're a new agent, you don't have a lot of information, you have questions. Let's get those questions answered. So I really appreciate you guys being with us today. Freddie, thank you so much for coming out and sharing your wealth of knowledge with us. Hopefully we'll get you in later in the year again to ask the appraiser, so that way we can get more agents on the call asking you guys more and more questions. So any final thoughts for us, Freddie?
I just really appreciate you inviting me in here. Love working with local agents. You guys are doing a great job building an awesome team there, and you guys are going to continue to keep crushing it. And the more we can help each other be on the same team, the easier everything goes. So
Perfect. Okay, so tomorrow, guys, I've got a special guest. Carly with Priority Title is going to be here with us at 10:30 to actually close out the deal. So our boot camp, buyers boot camp, is finishing up. And then in February, we're starting the listing boot camp. And again, it's going to be on Tuesdays and Wednesdays for 4 weeks, getting you ready for the selling season here in Chattanooga in the North Georgia area. So thanks, guys. I look forward to seeing you then.